You're listening to the ESO Network, your station for all things geek.
Hi, we're Enterprise Splaining, the podcast where we explain Star Trek Enterprise to each other and to you. I'm Bill, and these are my co-hosts Maria.
Hello.
And Jamie.
Hi.
And today we have a special guest this week, K.O. Myers.
Hello.
K.O. Myers, why are you on this podcast?
I help out with final mixing of the show and have been sort of around the edges hinting that I would like to be a guest, and so you finally caved.
So what is your experience with Star Trek and specifically Star Trek Enterprise?
So I have consumed a fair amount of Star Trek, but I've realized
You have Star Trek residue in your system as we speak.
I do a little bit. Yeah, I haven't been able to squeegee it all off. I realized as I was thinking about that question, I don't think I've ever actually watched an entire series all the way through. And so I've never seen a single episode of Enterprise. It's been entirely moderated.
Welcome to our world.
My experience of Enterprise, I think, probably more gently has been moderated through your show. But I watched Next Generation. I was 12. I was about to turn 12 when Next Generation premiered in '87. So I watched all that pretty regularly, and I watched DS9. I had seen most of the original series. I saw all of the movies up to, I think, the one with the Borg Queen. Was that Insurrection?
First Contact.
First Contact. There we go. I'm pretty sure I watched the first few seasons of Voyager. I did watch the first and third seasons of Picard because I was the, at least theoretically, the target for the fan service.
For
the third season, you were 100% the target.
Oh yeah.
And I watched the first series and the first season and thought, gosh, this is sort of fan servicey. I mean, it's interesting, but when they said they were getting the whole crew back for the third series, I was like, okay, I will indulge. So I've not seen Lower Decks. I've not seen Prodigy. I haven't seen Discovery. So
Strange New Worlds?
No, not Strange New Worlds either. I did watch the series of the animated shorts that they did for the anniversary of the animated series. I have unfortunately not
very
seen
short treks. Yeah,
yes, those were fantastic. Yeah. I have unfortunately, Bill, not seen the original animated series, or at least not much of it.
It's fun. It's worth your time.
I'm pretty sure that I have never seen the premiere episode of the premiere and the series finale of any of those individual series.
Oh wow!
Wow.
So, all of this to say is that I am I'm in a weird middle generation of people who I was obviously, the original series was long in reruns by the time I started watching Star Trek, and so Next Gen was kind of my Star Trek, and then I really liked DS9. I think of them all, that was sort of my favorite, but fell away from it eventually, and have just been existing in this weird sort of Star Trek list limbo, and really until your show came along. So I don't know if I'm getting back in the habit exactly.
And now we're going to drag you down with us.
Hurt me, Daddy.
Thank you very much for that. Today we're going to be talking about the Star Trek Enterprise episode Vox Sola. However, I'm the only person who has actually watched it, so it's my job to explain to my co-hosts what happened on the episode. But before we get to that, let's first talk a little bit about last week's episode, because last week Maria told us about the episode Detained. Jamie and I have finally been able to watch it. So Jamie, now that we've seen it, anything you noticed that you'd like to talk about or add to Maria's thoughts from last week?
It was just nice seeing Travis actually get to do something for once.
It was very nice.
He got beat up. That was big character development for him.
I know. He got beat up and Archer really didn't. It was weird. So not like him.
They still just didn't use him that much, though. It was really just in the beginning. Once Archer woke up, there seemed to be very little for Travis to do.
Yep.
Like later, they had Malcolm go like dressed in Suliban face and go down. They did not need to do that. Like Malcolm did not need to be there. They could have just sent all the weapons, and then Travis could have been the one to put up all the explosives. But I guess because they're explosives, it had to be Malcolm.
It's his thing.
He did have a big smile on his face when he blew everything up. My other comments, T'Pol. So T'Pol was clearly in charge when Archer was not on the Enterprise, but whenever she was talking to someone over comms, Trip would just interrupt her. Like she would be about to say something, and then Trip would just interrupt and sort of take over. Like the second half of the conversation was always Trip, which was so rude. Like he would never have done that to Archer.
It gave me real woman in tech vibes, y'all.
I will say this crew does that a lot. I forget what the episode was. I think it might have been Fortunate Son, where like they're trying to negotiate with the ship, and then suddenly Mayweather just like suddenly starts interject. Like everybody feels free to pitch in, like it's a fucking brainstorming session.
Yeah, I agree. I think I mentioned it when in the scene where Archer and Travis are first meeting Colonel Grat, Dean Stockwell's character. Travis just like jumps in and like this is literally a first contact situation.
Yeah.
And he's just like, but what about this? Like, you're an ensign, dude. Shut up and let your captain do its thing. It's very strange.
So there was no resolution for the guy who went back to get the other guy.
Right? That was my like, what the hell? We
never
assume
saw them again.
everything worked out.
We don't even know that they're still alive.
Nope, no idea.
It was so strange because he's like, I'm going to go back and like save the other guy. And then we just never saw either of them again. Maybe they both died. Who knows?
We leave no one behind unless it's a really like a C plot.
Yeah, I think the scene where Archer is like on the shuttle pod going back to the Enterprise and he's like, did they all make it? And whoever's like, yep, they made it. I think that's where we're supposed to assume that everything was fine and nobody died.
No,
but like,
okay.
that's such a critical like storyline. What the hell?
You're making me stick up for this show, which makes me angry. And he's like, what happens is Travis says, are they going to be okay? And Archer says, are they going to make it out of this, whatever they call it, space?
Yeah.
Yes.
No, but I'm talking about before that.
Yeah,
Okay.
no, that's talking about all of the
Okay.
Suliban.
All right.
But we don't know, those two guys may have died. We have no idea.
In that scene, before Travis asks that, Archer checks in with, I think, T'Pol, and he's like, what's going on with the patrols? And she's like, we got those guys taken care of. And then he's like, what about all the Suliban ships? And they're like, they've all gone. They're all good. They've all managed to escape.
It's just so strange that we never saw them again. When they were like the beating heart of the episode.
Right. They were the main point of this episode. And then the guy runs off to save the other guy. And we never see if that worked out or not, or if that child became an orphan because they both died.
My last note was when the one guy said that the reason they were holding all the Suliban in the internment camp was because Suliban can look like anyone. But then they put Malcolm in Suliban face, which implies that humans also can just look like anyone. It turns out everybody can just look like anyone with future Star Trek technology. So
that's a good point.
It really makes no sense that they're making this big deal about the Suliban can look like anyone.
Well, I think, again, not to defend the show, but I think that was more, yes, they can look like anyone, but also they have like superpowers with these genetic enhancements.
Right.
So like they can climb up walls and they can see weird shit.
Yeah, but the only superpower he mentioned was they can look like anyone.
Right.
So my thoughts on this, it's Enterprise trying to grapple with a real world issue, which isn't their strong suit because this show has a really naive view of right and wrong. That having been said, I appreciate the fact that they were trying to grapple with a real world issue.
You tried.
But the problem is Now, obviously, this is an enemy within the episode, and I think we all speculated this may have been the first episode written after 9/11. So this is dealing with an enemy within episode where it's made explicit with a shape-shifting alien. The problem is DS9 did this better for many, many seasons. We're almost to the end of this first season. I have no idea what the Suliban actually want or what the temporal Cold War is about.
Nope.
And it's kind of, if DS9 did not exist and this was just their first grappling attempt, I would be like, okay, this is kind of an interesting idea, but they've dealt with this better.
Yeah, so I think the thing that I was kind of disappointed in, just talking about Travis being in this episode more, every other episode, like, so lately it seems like they've been trying to do, okay, let's focus on this character. Let's look at Malcolm and Trip and see let's look at them and let's build their characters. But other than the fact that Travis was blanket scared of all Suliban and isn't anymore, there really wasn't a whole lot of character development. I feel like it was an opportunity missed to really get a little bit more about Travis. And I think that, like I said, other than the fact that they are also kind of fighting the Suliban, this could have been any alien. Like, it doesn't have to be the Suliban. It could have been anyone. And I was really hoping, like, when I first saw the Suliban in the cold open, I was like, great, at least we'll learn a little bit more about what the hell is going on with the Suliban. But you know what? We learn nothing.
No.
Nothing.
And apparently, this is going to be the only time we ever see Suliban civilians. They're never coming back.
Also,
that checks out. Oh, that checks out.
Final note: kind of a waste of Dean Stockwell. I mean, he's a great actor.
A huge waste.
He was very fun and goofy in Quantum Leap, and he's also been in extremely weird movies. He's an actor with a great range. I think he did the best he could with what he was given, as he's kind of like, he's the bad administrator, and he's trying to explain why his country is, or his system, planet, government is doing what they're doing, and I think he did an okay job with that.
I think I kind of wished that they'd used him in the previous episode, which was all about holograms. It would have been so much better. Like, swap him and Rene Auberjonois, and it would have been great.
Rene Auberjonois would have been great in this episode.
Would he have been great in this episode?
I mean, he would have been in any episode.
As a cop or as an official who is extremely focused on law and order to whatever end. Yeah, I think that would have been.
I suppose
he'd be great at pretty much any character anywhere. So
yeah. And I suppose putting him in that role would have been too close to what he was as Odo, potentially.
But that would have been an interesting contrast,
yes.
as opposed to somebody who was the shapeshifter. Now he has to deal with. Okay, anyway, that's a really cool idea.
Yeah, you just swapped him. Oh well.
Okay, now
I just want to. I'm sorry. I just want to. The idea of a temporal Cold War to me is fascinating, like, because my understanding. I'm certainly not a military history or politics expert, but my understanding of a Cold War is that it is a, hostilities where there are minor skirmishes, but it never really but it's mostly political sanctions, travel bans, that sort of thing.
We still don't know what the temporal Cold War is about. And a matter of fact, the last episode that dealt with this deliberately muddied the waters.
Oh, fascinating.
In terms of who's right and who's wrong, because the Suliban, who have been depicted as the enemy, the quote unquote, the bad guys, actually saved the Enterprise.
They were just civilian Suliban that have no special powers, no genetic enhancements, had no idea what was going on with the temporal Cold War. We're not involved in it.
Well, and that's kind of what I'm getting at, is that for most folks who are living in a Cold War situation, it is just business as usual. There's probably some tension. Like I grew up in the actual Cold War. I remember I never had to do any nuclear drills or anything, but I remember there being this sort of tension in the air about one of these days somebody could fire off a nuke and then we'd all be toast.
Oh yeah.
But there's not any actual. So if you're talking about a war that's not actually a shooting war that is happening across time, then theoretically I'm in a Cold War with my younger self. I'm really mad about a lot of his decisions, but I'm not. I can't get to him to take him to beat him up about it. So temporal Cold War.
It is.
So it's interesting you're saying that because, sorry, I'm still in the Dean Stockwell Quantum Leap world, but it sort of felt, I've always sort of thought that and I don't know what the temporal Cold War is going to be, but I kind of always thought it was sort of agents traveling through time to specific moments in history to change things.
Okay.
Presumably for the worse,
Which
is
did.
sort of the concept of Quantum Leap, right?
They explicitly did it in Quantum Leap because they introduced the idea of the evil leaper
the
who was there
evil
to
leaper.
make things worse.
Yeah.
Okay, wait.
Yeah.
I thought the temporal Cold War was them going forward in time to get future technology to bring back.
Oh,
It's
you
not
might be right about
explained.
that too.
I don't
Yeah.
think we know. I think we're just
We don't
guessing
know.
because we've heard the words temporal Cold War a bunch of times and have no idea what they mean.
No, this is a
Correct.
total J.J. Abrams mystery box where they came up with a cool idea, and it's like, oh, what's this about? We'll tell you later. Don't you want to look at this mysterious hat that we don't know what's in
what
it?
it means.
And I do think we learn more. I think we will learn more about it. I think they're just such a slow burn on this. If they are trying to make the Suliban the big bads of this, they're not. It's not working. I don't really care. So we'll see how this goes.
Drew Leiter here. Wish you could keep up on DC Comics but don't have the time or the money? Not a problem. Join Cletus Jacobs and I as we bring you recaps and commentary on DC Comics, television, movies, and more, whether they are good or not. The Earth Station DCU podcast comes out weekly and is part of the ESO Network.
Okay, now that we've got that out of the way, it's time to talk about this week's episode. Computer, what episode will we be talking about this week?
Vox Sola. When a strange symbiotic alien creature boards Enterprise and captures several crew members, it's up to Hoshi to decipher the creature's complex language.
Now it's time for Two Truths and a Lie, and it will be my co-host's job to suss out which is which. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Statement number 1. The crew performs an indecent act in public, wrecking a first contact.
Oh, shit. 100% plausible. Go on.
Indecent is interesting.
Indecent is
Yeah, that word does a lot of work.
Statement number 2. Malcolm invents the force field.
Huh.
Statement number 3. With Hoshi out of action, Trip is forced into the role of translator.
Wait, is a force field a thing? I should know what that is.
It's the shield. It's essentially, it's an
Oh, it's
energy
just this-
barrier that protects the ship.
But it
Okay.
can also, people use force fields inside too, to the brig has a force field instead of bars.
Yeah, it's an
like
energy barrier.
A way to,
Okay.
a barrier, basically.
I think that's a lie.
Okay.
I think the indecent exposure is a lie.
Okay.
Interesting. Well, I think then just for the sake of one of us has to be right, I'm going to go with the translator thing. Is the
Okay.
lie.
All right, your choices.
And also
have-
because that would be the objectively most funniest of the, I think, of those choices. Or at least
choices-
most.
Your decisions
Terrible?
have
I
been
don't know.
locked in. Before we begin discussing this episode, sidebar, this episode was directed by Roxanne Dawson, who played B'Elanna Torres on Voyager. So we
yeah.
continue with it. Cold open, the ship is in space, and we open with the captain's star log. Archer wonders if bringing an alien race, the Cretaceans, on board was a mistake because they are pissed. As the crew follows them down a hallway, they are stomping away, they are angry and yelling in an alien language. Hoshi is trying to translate, but she's only getting the word insult as she taps it into the universal translator. And also she thinks they're saying, "You eat like you mate." In terms of their look, the Cretaceans are wearing these floor-length sort of tunics, these sort of like robe-like outfits, and they look like bumpy aliens, and they kind of look like they have dreadlocks, but it's like it's hard to tell if it's hair or if it's part of if it's skin coming out of their head. Archer is attempting to apologize for whatever they did, but they are having none of it. They leave Enterprise via the airlock, and Trip says, well, that's one for the record. Briefest first contact. But as the airlock is retracting, we see a clear jelly-like creature who climbs aboard the Enterprise into the airlock. And we have faith. It's time for Jamie's Diane Warren update of the week.
Diane Warren is somehow still on Twitter. Everyone else has moved over to Blue Sky, so I don't know what she's still doing over there. But I did briefly go to that website to see if she said anything about the election, and she had one tweet. It said, "When I wrote, if I could turn back time, I didn't mean this."
Savage. All right.
But
Speaking of someone who's in a temporal Cold War.
Really?
Oh my God. But in other Diane Warren news, Grammy nominations just came out. Diane Warren did not get a nomination, but Angelica Schuyler was nominated in the Best Global Music Performance category for the song Sunlight to My Soul, which was written by Diane Warren.
Oh, nice.
But I don't think it counts for Diane Warren because it's Best Global It's Best Global Music Performance is the category.
So she'll get what's it called?
She'll probably get a nice fruit basket from the Grammy Academy.
Residual accolades if she gets it.
So Angelique Kidjo is a Beninese French Afro pop singer. I was really embarrassed because I had never heard of her. But when I started looking into her, I realized she is huge. She's probably the most well-known Afropop singer. She's been around since the 90s. She was part of Lilith Tour. That's how long she's been around. This is her 14th Grammy nomination. She's actually won 5 times, which I think is actually how many Grammys Diane Warren herself has. The song, though, it's called Sunlight to My Soul. In my opinion, it's okay. It's fine. It's better than some of the other Diane Warren songs, but
I feel
it's
like
definitely not
you
her
might have
best.
talked about this before.
That was a different one.
Oh, that was a different one.
That was a totally different song.
It also had Afropop, though, right?
Yeah,
that
one had Afro beats under it.
It was for that movie that nobody had ever heard of and will probably never see, right?
Yeah, this
the
is
animated
totally
movie?
different song. I listened to some of the other music by her, and it was all better than this song. I highly recommend watching Angelique Kidjo's Tiny Desk concert. It was actually the 1,000th Tiny Desk concert, and it was really good. So strongly recommend that. Good luck to her, though. It'd still be exciting if she wins.
Thank you, Jamie. Back on the bridge, Hoshi is bummed out by her failure to translate the alien language, which she is still plugging away at on her little tricorder device. She notes that depending on the emphasis, the word for eat and mate are the same. The variations are the most subtle she's ever seen in any alien language. T'Pol, sitting nearby, points out that they're relying on her to recognize the difference, and Hoshi takes this as an accusation that she fucked up the first contact.
Does seem like she did, though.
Wait, are they being snippy at each other again?
Well, we're going to get into that. It depends on how you're reading this situation. It gets into how you're reading T'Pol's reactions to everything. Hoshi is going to be super sensitive about everything throughout this episode, and T'Pol is being Vulcan T'Pol. So T'Pol is just making declaratively true statements.
I know she's getting upset.
Hoshi's not in the mood to hear it.
Okay, but T'Pol makes statements that are true and are also cutting at times.
Yeah. Is she making true statements the way she makes true statements to Trip? Or is she, because when she makes true statements to Trip, it's savage.
Yeah, and last time we had these two interacting, it was them just constantly being snippy at each other.
Until the towards the end where they sort of chilled and like did the meditation and whatever.
The sexy hand meditation thing.
Sexy hand meditation thing that they did, which, you know, I was into, but I don't think this show, again, too heteronormal to deal with that.
I just don't want my only two female characters to be fighting with each other for no good reason.
Hoshi takes this as an accusation that she fucked up the first contact. T'Pol says she didn't say that. And maybe it was Mr. Tucker's table manners that offended the aliens, so she tries to throw...
This is not working. Let me just throw a knife and Trip on the way out here.
You get some shade, and you get some shade.
Hoshi does not pick up on the hint to throw Trip under the bus. And
Hoshi.
T'Pol advises her not to get emotional and try to learn from her mistakes. This does not go over well with Hoshi. The sensitivity of Hoshi's hearing plays a big part in this episode, and she picks up on something is just wrong in comms. Not only can she hear the static, there's a distortion in the static. She points this out to Trip, who walks in not hearing the slam that T'Pol did on him. Trip asks if it's an emergency. Hoshi says no, it's just annoying, and Trip says, okay, I'll look into it first thing in the morning. Because he's worried about Archer. Archer is sulking in his ready room because of the failure of the first contact.
Does he have Porthos with him?
He does not. He's in his ready room. Trip comes in with his big golden retriever energy to cheer him up. There's prime ribs tonight with real horseradish. Unfortunately, Archer has the grumpies. Trip reaches into his pocket and pulls out a microchip. He says, I was going to save this for a rainy day. It's Stanford versus Texas. The finals? Fresh out of the subspace mailbag.
We don't know what sport.
Is it water polo?
Cut to the captain's bedroom.
Right.
Captain's bedroom.
Cut to the captain's bedroom where we see Porthos!
Yes!
That's why I had to make it explicit that we were in the ready room and not the captain's room. Porthos is asleep in his doggy bed, but he immediately wakes up and jumps on the bed and starts barking at the air vent, where we see the jelly creature is making its way through the air ducts.
Oh,
Oh,
if it messes with the dog, I'm going to be upset.
No, Porthos will be fine.
We're in the mess hall. Malcolm, Travis, and Hoshi are trying to figure out what went wrong with the first contact. Maybe the aliens don't like being touched. They can't really figure out where it went wrong because it all happened so suddenly. Hoshi's in her own little world. Travis asks Malcolm if he's coming to the movie tonight because it's Wages of Fear, a classic French movie. Malcolm is uninterested until Travis literally tells him that things blow up in it. And Malcolm goes, huh, sounds fun.
Am I allowed to make a speculative prediction here? Okay.
Please.
Okay.
Always.
So I think First Contact is a red herring. I think that the aliens were only there to distract everybody while the jelly creature got on board, right. And then they're blowing up and leaving was like, we've got proximity now. The jelly creature's been delivered or is close enough.
Oh, you think the aliens planted the jelly creature?
I think that they either they planted it deliberately or they made space for it to get there.
That's a good theory.
That's a great theory. I approve.
So I look forward to being spectacularly wrong because I can't imagine this show would actually lend itself to that sort of subterfuge.
And then
so far, every
pregnant.
time every time any of us have made a prediction, it's not only turned out to be wrong, but it turned out that our prediction was better than whatever actually happened.
Always. Remember last week when you guys were like, who's going to defend Archer and Travis? Is it going to be a courtroom scene with T'Pol? And I was like, yeah, that's great. Let's talk about that. That never happens.
No, they just start another blood war and then flee the area.
Exactly. We should know by now.
I I do love when Star Trek has alien court
me
scenes,
too.
especially
Oh,
because
me
all
too.
the alien
Fantastic.
courts have all the exact details that are in U.S. court systems.
Oh yeah.
Except for the
It would make
Cardassians.
no sense. But even the Cardassians, they still have it all set up the same. They still use the same language.
That's true.
Hoshi tells the two of them that she's turning in early and leaves, but as she's walking down the hallway, her super sharp ears hear knocking sounds coming from a wall panel. We cut through the wall panel, we see the creature crawling through that, but nothing comes of that. Hoshi doesn't pry the panel
Yeah, she
open and
just
find the
hear-
creature. She hears it.
Okay, wait. I thought that Vulcans were the one. Vulcans have really sharp hearing. Is that wrong?
Well, I mean,
They
remember,
have very
I
sharp
think what they're-
ears.
You have a letter opener. If there's a Vulcan around, you don't have to worry about it.
They have very strong sense of smell. I think
Okay.
it's the Ferengis who have really good hearing.
In engineering, we see two minor crew members who we've not met yet before. One is a man named Rostov, and the other one is a female named Kelly. Rostov is complaining that they're going to be late for the movie, but Kelly just needs to finish one last task. But then power goes out in one of the cargo bays. Rostov is like, let the night shift deal with it. It'll only take a few minutes. And then Kelly says, well, if it'll only take a few minutes, we can afford to check it out.
Are they both men or she? So Kelly's
One's a
Kelly's
woman.
a woman.
Yeah.
Kelly is an African-American woman, and Rostov is a white man.
An African-American woman? We have not seen that on this show.
We have before.
Have we?
Yeah, we saw the camera went by a black woman in engineering once.
Yeah.
Oh, well, it must be this lady then. Great.
Yeah. Kelly says, well, then we have time to check it out. She tosses him a flashlight and says it'll only take 10 minutes to check. Then she tosses him a communicator because comms are out in the cargo bay too. Dun, dun, dun.
So they're dead before the first ad break.
Apparently not. Apparently, even though he's a big movie aficionado, Rostov has never seen any horror movie
Right.
ever made.
Go in there. Don't go in there, man.
They didn't. Somebody should have programmed Alien in one of these movie nights, and
Well.
he would have survived.
Hold on to that thought. Malcolm and Travis are waiting for the movie to start, and we get a lot of casual clothes in this scene. I'm anxious to hear back the fashion
Yay,
report.
casual clothes.
A lot of people. Malcolm and Travis are not wearing casual clothes, but there are a lot of people around them who are in Star Trek casual.
I love me some Star Trek casual.
Malcolm reminds Travis that he was promised explosions, but as the lights dim, the movie screen goes fuzzy, and instead of a movie, we see what looks like security camera footage of Phlox in medbay. Before he can do anything weird, the camera shifts around to other areas of the ship.
Oh my god.
Creepy.
Malcolm calls into engineering to report the problem. Meanwhile, in Archer's quarters, Trip and Archer have switched into their casual clothes and are enjoying a beer while they watch water polo!
Water polo! I
got it,
told you it
Maria.
was gonna be water polo!
Okay.
Wow.
Wait, what do their casual clothes look like?
They just look like long sleeve, like casual shirts. Trip is wearing sort of a burgundy red shirt, and Archer's wearing earth tones.
Nice.
Are they in
I'm sure-
shorts?
No, they are not in their underpants. They are wearing.
I didn't ask.
She didn't say underpants. She said shorts.
They're just wearing.
You can see their legs.
They're
Yeah,
having.
they have great legs.
I don't even think. It's just I don't think you see their below their torsos at all. But they're having beer and pretzels, and Archer is sort of explaining the rules.
Is Porthos in the seat?
You do not see.
All I want
Porthos in
to
the scene.
all I want to know is if
At no,
Porthos is in the seat.
at no point is Porthos trying to pull on Archer's leg, saying, "There's a fucking monster."
There's a fucking monster in the vent, you jackass.
Maybe the dog wants to watch some water polo.
Yeah. Remember that one time when I got kidnapped by an alien? I'm a little nervous now.
It's also weird because they're watching this on a monitor, so it's like this is very clearly an actual water polo match, and like one guy is like wrestling and choking another guy out in the polo. It's like, wow, these guys play rough. Back in the cargo bay, Rostov enters the suspicious dark room with his flashlight and starts poking around. He finds a trail of
Are
white.
there no light switches?
The power is out
power's
in the
out.
cargo bay.
Oh, okay.
He finds a trail of white slime and, like an idiot, follows it around a corner where we see some kind of webbing. He gets on the communicator and says, "Kelly," and Kelly says yes, before he is immediately cut off. Kelly heads down to the cargo bay with her flashlight without alerting anyone what's going on.
Oh.
You said there was webbing?
We see there's like a tendril. He sees like a
So it's some sort of a Shelob situation, is what you're saying. Like,
Back in Archer's room, Trip and Archer are having a fine old time watching the game. Trip is really getting into it. They get a call on the communicator from Kelly, who says, "Sir, there's some kind of life form in the cargo bay, and it's got Rostov, but..."
I love it.
I guess there's now 29% women on the Enterprise.
In an amazing display of intelligence, Trip and Archer arm themselves, call security, and head down to the cargo bay.
There you go. I mean, they took the step of arming themselves and letting someone else know where they were going. So yeah, that's actually for about
A+, guys. With Malcolm in the lead, they move into.
I was going to say they called Malcolm, right?
Yep, it's Malcolm, another guy who has a rifle, a phaser rifle of some sort, which I don't think we've seen before, and the two of them. So they move into the cargo bay tactically. They find that Kelly and Rostov have been wrapped up in a web that looks like, and I'm sorry to put this to you, gentle listener, it looks like a monster made out of packing tape and jizz.
Oh no.
And I would not say that so indelicately, except it's going to come up a lot in this as we go on in this episode.
Jizz is going to come up a lot in this.
Yeah. Prepare yourself.
Can
College
we
all over again.
Whoa. I mean, I'm glad you had fun. I hope you had fun, at least. If jizz came up a lot and it was a bad time, then that's a whole different conversation.
That's a whole different thing.
Can we challenge ourselves to try to find a different word than jizzed every time?
Well,
there
we'll
are certainly.
see.
There are many words we can use.
I'll say white goop as much as possible, but when you watch this episode, you're not going to be able to get this out of your head. As the security team shines their lights on the crew members, the creature tightens its grip on Kelly, and Archer picks up on this. He tells them to turn their lights off. Malcolm determines that Kelly is alive, and they can hear Rostov's voice, and Rostov is telling them to leave. 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 They beat cheeks. They stage a tactical retreat, but a tendril grabs Archer, a tentacle, if you will, grabs Archer and pulls him away. Trip tries to save him, but he gets pulled away too. Malcolm fires off a shot which severs one of the tentacles. He ends up with this later. Don't worry about that. Trip tells Malcolm to get out of there, and Malcolm runs away. The other crew member who had the phaser rifle is apparently also captured. Okay?
Wow.
We cut to Malcolm.
So, do we know if the two original people who got taken are still alive?
Malcolm did a scan and determined that Kelly was still alive, and then Rostov was alive enough to tell them that they needed to leave.
Because they want to be alone with the jizz monster.
Exactly.
This is the best thing that's happened in 9 months.
We're having a very private moment here.
And then the other people who were taken was Archer,
And
Trip, and another random crew member.
Another security guy.
I will say this from a story perspective. It doesn't. It obviously it's more dramatic, but from a non-story sort of tactical perspective, it doesn't make a ton of sense that the captain of the whole ship would be the person that would go in leading the charge if there is a dangerous creature in the cargo bay.
Yes, but that is classic Star Trek. They
absolutely.
always go on the away mission.
Right.
This is specifically 100 years before Kirk, and Archer is always first and foremost in every damn thing they do.
Yes, that's a Star Trek trope. I just.
Oh, yeah. No, it doesn't make sense.
It's a fair point.
We cut to Malcolm is giving a security briefing to Hoshi, Travis, and to Paul. He says that the creature is growing and that they should evacuate the entire deck.
So it's it's expanding. The jizz is expanding.
Yep.
It's a carrying in the whole deck. Wow.
They try to figure out how it got on board. Well, the last time they had the airlock open was when the Cretaceans were leaving. There's some speculation. Was this deliberate or not? T'Pol says they don't think it was an attack by them, and they don't even know if the creature is hostile, but Malcolm doesn't buy that. You didn't see it, how it went after the captain. Malcolm is kind of bloodthirsty in this episode.
Oh, in this episode?
Yeah.
Travis figures that the Cretaceans might know something about the creature and they should find them. T'Pol says to start the search, but they'll need their communications to be better than last time. She doesn't say it like I did. She says it in her flash voice. She doesn't look at Hoshi and go, well, we'll need our communications. But that's how Hoshi takes it. I'll do my best. She is being very surly. Cut to Phlox, who is about to examine the tendril that Malcolm severed. Phlox is in the decom room wearing an environmental suit in one of the most amazing displays of intelligence I have ever seen this show do.
Yeah.
He's sort of examining it. He takes a tissue sample, and the tendril, which is still alive, tries to climb up his arm. This is no earthworm, he says. It has a very sophisticated neural network. Hoshi reckons they might be able to communicate with it. She recognizes some kind of pattern in whatever Phlox is recording. Malcolm jumps on this, saying it would take days to translate anything that complex, and Hoshi says, what other choice do we have? T'Pol denies...
Translating just like neurons? I don't understand.
She sees some
She
sort
says
of pattern.
it's trying to. Yeah, she says it's trying to communicate. Is what
With its neuron patterns? Okay.
It's got sort of Contact vibes of the scene with the guy listening to the headphones going, oh wait, there's pattern to this static noise.
Right.
T'Pol denies Hoshi's request because there isn't enough time to translate. Since phase pistols don't work, they'll need something else. Phlox suggests that EM radiation might do the job, since the creature is sensitive to light. Malcolm is excited about building a new weapon.
Yep. All checks out.
We cut to the cargo bay where Archer, Trip, and Rostov are writhing around and groaning in this webbing with the goop covering them more and more. Remember Kelly? Well, don't worry about her because she's apparently been completely knocked out, as is the other security guy. Rostov makes a joke that they've probably canceled the movie, which he was looking forward to seeing. Everybody chuckles.
Great. Good job, guys. This is definitely the time to make jokes.
Yeah.
How do you decide who's the punchline, who's the straight man in that situation? Like, which one of us is gonna riff and which one of us is gonna nod along?
I don't know. All I do know is that in this show, everybody's the straight man.
And when you have a Vulcan in the crew, that's like a hard bar to hit.
All right.
Malcolm and another crew member enter and have these devices, which it's hard to describe what they look like. They don't look like laser pistols, but they do shoot the beams. When they turn on the EM emitters, the creature starts screaming. It kind of sounds like, I don't know, it kind of sounds like like if you ever heard like a sci-fi dolphin scream, that high-pitched noise, that's what it sounds like. But all the humans start screaming too. Phlox tells them to stop because their nervous systems are starting to merge with the aliens and they're killing the humans as well. So Malcolm has to pull back. Phlox runs the numbers, and if they don't do something soon, the symbiosis will be complete and he won't be able to separate them. There won't be 6 creatures in that cargo bay. There will only be 1. T'Pol tells Hoshi to try her plan.
Has anyone asked if they want to be separated?
Yeah, maybe they're having a good time, man.
Right?
You're in a cargo bay with a bunch of guys covered in spooge. Seems like not that bad of a Saturday night.
Does sound like somebody's college experiences, apparently. I mean, I just think it's worth at least checking.
Oh, yeah, you should ask the question.
The Hoshi thing, like T'Pol telling Hoshi, no, don't try to like figure out how to communicate with it because that'll take too long. When like the whole weapon plan, I understand that that will just be faster, but couldn't Hoshi have started on the other plan anyway? Like, it seems like it would be smart to have a backup plan.
Can't a crew do two things at once?
Not this crew. There's no B plots in this episode, in this show.
We can walk and... What was the other thing?
Chew gum.
We can walk, though, right?
We can kind of walk.
Well, now you got me thinking about it. Malcolm is concerned that the creature is continuing to grow. He's concerned that it might expand outside of the cargo bay. He explains to T'Pol that Starfleet has been working on a stable EM field for years. And T'Pol says, "You mean a force field?"
Oh.
Malcolm says he's been working on his own prototype that is stable enough to absorb a phase pistol blast 60% of the time. And T'Pol says, "You need to work quickly."
I have a question. I guess we don't know the answer to this, but haven't the Vulcans given them some technology? Like, don't the Vulcans have force fields? Why would they? That seems like an important thing to just give them as they are going on this. Okay, never mind.
The Enterprise in the show specifically does not have shields. It has hull plating. That was their thing.
Polarized hull plating, yeah.
Travis tells T'Pol that he's found the aliens they were looking for. They're about 2.5 light years away, but they're not responding to any of their hails. She tells him to head that way and keep hailing them. Meanwhile, Hoshi is frustrated because she's not having any luck with the translation.
Well, she's trying to talk to an octopus, right? That's, like, not an easy thing to do.
She's trying to talk to the severed arm of an octopus.
Yeah, that's right. She's trying to talk to an octopus leg.
T'Pol says, "This situation requires expertise, not luck. And if Hoshi doesn't have that expertise, no one on the ship does." These two are talking at cross purposes. It's obvious that Hoshi blames herself, but of course, the way T'Pol words things is not that encouraging because, as I think we have picked up on, T'Pol has low emotional IQ. She does not know.
No, T'Pol does this stuff she says these things on purpose.
I think T'Pol fully understands because there have been many situations where T'Pol has been weirdly aware of the men's emotional state. But this Hoshi T'Pol thing that they're playing with, this is weird to me. And just absolutely like this catfight vibe that they've been doing for a couple of episodes now.
In that episode with Renee Auberjonois, like when she was making the comments about Trip getting pregnant previously, and then the other girl walked in, like she knew enough to be like, "Oh, we're just talking about some past stuff that we did." Like, she's smart enough to know that that's not a comment that you should say in front of this other person, which means she was saying it specifically to get under Trip's skin.
Yeah, for sure.
So Hoshi says the problem is that the translation matrix isn't set up to deal with a language, quote unquote, like this. It's more like calculus than linguistics. And T'Pol says mathematics is sometimes considered a language. Gang, what if they worked together?
Heaven forbid.
Language-wise, is she trying to, like, translate, like, the movement of the tentacle? Or no, it really is, like, trying to translate the actual synapses in the tentacle?
It's hard to describe this. It'll make much more sense when you see the visuals for this, because when Hoshi is looking at her little tricorder of the Cretacean language, it's presented as a series of numbers. And then when she looks at whatever this quote-unquote neural network is, it's presented as a series of data. It doesn't look like a waveform. It'll make more sense when you see this, is what I'm trying to tell you.
I mean, to be fair, it's Star Trek language. Star Trek language is, I mean, all the languages are weird, right? There's always some weird alien that they have to figure out. So I'm not, I mean...
But it's not a language. She's just looking at its synapses firing, which is not language. That's not...
But she thinks that there is some sort of a pattern to it. So this creature is somehow communicating in a weird way. She is finding some sort of pattern.
Okay, but... why would it even be saying anything? Like it's a tentacle. It doesn't have ears. Like it can't hear her.
It's saying,
I've been cut off. I'm dying. Please reattach me.
help me.
Well,
I mean, the idea, like, with a human that you could do a brain scan and then somehow, like, translate, like, could do a translation for the scan.
I want to push back on that a little bit, because there have been experiments that were able to tap into neurons and were able to translate. So basically they were able to get a picture of what the person was seeing by reading it directly from the neurons.
Oh,
it's
Really?
yes.
Yeah, but a linguist didn't do that.
No, a linguist didn't do that. I'm just suggesting that it is possible to read. Sorry.
Yeah, and this is Star Trek.
Different than language. She's a linguist. Okay.
But, yeah. I think
well, Jamie, you're really attracting Hoshi here.
Poor Hoshi. She's trying.
She's got T'Pol on her case, and now Jamie's coming after her too.
Hoshi says...
You're being a real T'Pol here, Jamie.
Hoshi says that someone with higher mathematical skills might be able to help her process this data, and T'Pol points out that she has those qualifications, and they start by the two of them staring at a view screen for a couple of seconds before we cut to Cargo Bay, where our boys are just writhing around in pain and jizz and talking about water polo.
Talking about water polo!
This is I mean, if they're ever gonna have a conversation about water sports, this is when it's gonna come up.
Men will literally talk about anything other than therapy.
Trip in a very they're mostly encased at this point. Trip in a very pained voice says to Archer, "The Texas goalie can't block to the right because he keeps his hands too deep." And Archer says, "How do you know that?" And Rostov says, "Captain, I know that too." And Archer figures out that the alien is linking them all together.
Great. That's what you
Finally,
want us to be inside Trip's head.
Finally achieving the ultimate expression of the collective dream that is the Star Trek civilization in the first place. Like,
Good point.
Trip starts...
Or alluding to the Borg assimilation.
Very Borg.
Maybe echoing it. Yeah, that's biological and rather than technological.
Trip starts freaking out. "We gotta get out of here. This thing has gotten inside our heads." And Archer says, "Trip, do you know what I'm thinking right now?" I'm sorry, I can't believe I'm about to say this. This is literally what happens. Trip says, "North American Regionals! You were down 2 goals with 1 minute left. And what was I thinking? That you could win every game. And you did!"
Oh my god. Water polo.
Archer points out
Okay,
that...
to be fair, I do believe that is what's happening in Archer's head all of the time.
I mean, that's fair. That is a fair point.
Archer uses this as an example of, as long as you don't give up, you have a chance for victory. This calms Trip down.
Okay.
The stakes are a little lower, but yeah.
Malcolm walks into Med Bay, where Phlox has the sample, which is still alive but has gone dormant. Malcolm announces that he's going to run some tests to see how much stress it can take as part of his force field prototype, because he needs to know how much energy he can use without killing it or its captives. Phlox is taken aback by this.
Yeah.
He says, "If you intend to pummel this creature with EM radiation, I can't permit that. It's more than just a severed limb. It has shown signs of being an intelligent being." Malcolm is more concerned about the crew members, but Phlox suggests there are less invasive ways to gather the data, which will take slightly more time. They get into a debate about the creature's intentions. Phlox points out that they don't know what they are, and Malcolm takes the stance that he has to consider them to be hostile as head of security.
Yeah, but that still doesn't mean they should be torturing it.
Phlox flat out refuses to let Malcolm test the creature without his supervision. Malcolm Malcolm may outrank him, but he's the doctor, and this is his med bay, which means he's in charge, and only the captain can override him. And since the captain is not here, that won't happen.
And they have a terrible chain of command.
So the tentacle, even though because the tentacle has its own neurons and they believe is intelligent on its own, it is like its own creature. In which case, like the idea that you would like capture one of them and then run tests on it, especially tests that could or that would hurt it. Yeah, that seems really bad. The fact that Malcolm even goes to that is kind of terrifying.
Yeah, that's some Geneva Convention stuff. Like, we don't allow that now, today, much less 200 years from now or whatever.
Malcolm reluctantly agrees to Phlox's proposal. Back in another room, Hoshi and Sato are trying different techniques for interpreting their data, and it's not going well. Have you tried a bilateral algorithm? Did you compensate for frequency drift? Hoshi takes all of these suggestions as criticisms and jabs. And they finally get into it, and she says, "You asked me for my help. I didn't ask for you to keep track of my mistakes or second guess my abilities." Hoshi lays it all out. She feels that ever since T'Pol came on board, she's been looking over her shoulder, checking log entries, inspecting translations. T'Pol points out that as first officer, that's her job. They explicitly point out that T'Pol is the first officer of the series, and I double checked on Memory Alpha. This is the first mention that she is the first officer of the ship.
We have a chain of command.
There's an actual chain of command.
Finally, we're again 19 episodes in.
Yeah.
Also, two people actually discussing their problem, like adults. That's not something we've seen.
Well, that's because we rarely see the women together.
That's fair.
Hoshi looks at T'Pol and flat out says, "You don't think I belong on the Enterprise, do you?" T'Pol turns around, looks her straight in the eye, and says, "On the contrary, it would be a great loss to Starfleet if you were not part of this crew. If you feel I've been unfair to you, I apologize, but I hold you in high standard because I know you're capable of achieving it. Shall we continue?"
All right.
That's every abusive sports dad. I hold you. I'm hard on you because I know you can succeed, boy. Like,
oh my god!
But at least
they're talking.
Yeah, and they're passing the Bechdel test.
You can read this as you want to, but I think if you watch this, it comes off as Hoshi is being very hard on herself, and T'Pol is saying things like it comes off as Spock would say things as a Vulcan. It's like, don't be emotional.
Yeah.
Like, I'm taking my emotions out of this. We need to do our jobs as best as we can do this. But.
And I feel like this is actually completely in line with what we've seen about Hoshi. Like, Hoshi has always been like, I'm not sure I belong here. I'm not sure I can do this. She's got so much imposter syndrome that, like, any negative, we just happen to be seeing that T'Pol is saying the negative things. But I think anybody saying anything or questioning anything, she's going to take in the wrong way. So I do get that.
Just because this scene has come up in episodes before where the two female characters on the show have been sniping at each other, she just fucking lays it out and says,
"Good.
You're good enough. I'm laying this on. I'm telling you, I respect you. Do your fucking job." Hoshi is...
You're fine. Just fucking do your job.
Hoshi is taken aback by this and immediately comes up with the suggestion that they take another look at the subharmonics. Back on the bridge, which is empty except for Travis and one crew member way in the back. It's just Travis on the bridge by himself. And he gets a hail.
All right, Travis.
So they have a chain of command. It's just not so much concerned with operating the vessel.
Well, she's working the Hoshi.
She's got shit to do. Travis can fly the ship. That's all he has to do.
Malcolm is busy. T'Pol's busy. So Travis,
and all Travis
has
has to do is not crash. So
yeah, there's very few things out there in space to crash into. So he should be fine.
Travis is sitting. He's not in the captain's chair. He's sitting at helm, and they get a hail from the Cretaceans.
Have you seen our jizz monster?
Have you seen our pet jizz monster? His name is Fluffy, and we love him and miss him.
He holds up a poster. Have you seen this jizz monster? Responds to.
That is the title of this episode. Have you seen this jizz monster?
Travis is surprised because the Cretacean is speaking English, and the Cretacean says, "Yes, we translated your database. It wasn't that difficult."
Oh, shit!
Linguistics burn.
Another slam on Hoshi. Poor Hoshi, man.
I've been wondering about that because so far, every time they meet aliens, we're reliant on the translator devices that the Enterprise has. But I'm always like, a lot of these other alien species seem to have technology that's far ahead of what the humans have. So I've been kind of wondering that, like, why aren't they using their... Because I think we've established on Star Trek, you only need one side to have a translation device for it.
Well, the Ferengi had one.
And we did see... Yeah, I was going to say, we did see that with the Ferengi. Yeah, they figured it out.
Travis is clearly out of his comfort zone, but he explains the problem they're having with this alien organism that's on the ship. And the Cretacean, who looks immediately concerned, says, "Describe the organism." And Travis says, "Well, it's big, but it didn't start out this way." And I was really hoping that would be the entirety of Travis's discussion of the alien. But it's not. That's just the beginning.
It's like they'll joke about Adam meeting Eve for the first time and say, "Stand back, I don't know how long this thing gets."
Travis continues, "It's a large mass of tendrils like a web." The Cretacean explains that they have seen this creature on its homeworld, but he refuses to tell Travis where the planet is until they apologize for their offense. And Travis says, "I will, but we honestly have no idea what we did wrong."
Oh, Travis, honey, just apologize. Like, take the path that men for years have taken. Like, I'm sorry, honey. What are you sorry for? I'm just sorry.
Also, sorry, Travis should not be having this conversation. He needed to call to Paul.
To
the bridge. Like, the second he calls, he gets it. "Hold on one moment. Let me get the first officer."
You have no idea. Wait until you see Travis's expression. He is clearly the guy who's at reception. Who's like,
I wasn't even supposed to be here today.
Travis says, like, we don't know why we caused you offense. And the Cretacean says, "On your ship, you put food in your mouths." And
Okay.
Travis is like, "Okay." And the Cretacean says, "It's like mating. It's very offensive to us." And then Travis says, "How do you eat?" And he says it like a man who is really concerned about the answer he's about to receive.
Because the obvious answer is we eat in private and we don't
That
let
is what
anybody
he says.
watch us.
That is
But the potential for there,
right.
I mean,
that is exactly.
A lot of options.
That is exactly what the Cretacean says.
because if he thinks that putting something in your mouth is like mating, he may not have a great grasp on human anatomy,
Right.
frankly.
No,
He says, the Cretacean says, "Well, it's the same way, but in private." And Travis takes a step back and apologizes. He says, "On behalf of the entire crew, it was entirely a misunderstanding, and the apology is accepted." And they transmit the coordinates.
But then
of
why
the
did
planet.
they go to the dinner or whatever that they were invited? Like, because presumably they do not eat together. So
Right.
if they were invited to have a meal with the crew,
This
they should have
is-
said, "No, we feel uncomfortable," instead of going there and waiting for them to start eating and then be offended.
This is kind of addressed earlier in the episode where they were just leading through the aliens through the ship, and they came into the mess hall.
Okay.
They were like,
okay.
"Oh, we're going to show you around. This is our
I
mess hall.
see.
Look at
Yeah.
all of our people eating."
Here's
to them was
here's
like,
our orgy
"Look at our
room."
orgy.
It wasn't like they got invited to the
Yeah.
orgy, showed up, and were like, "Why are all these dicks out?" It was was they stumbled on the orgy.
How dare you show us your orgy room? Give us our jizz monster back.
Give us our jizz monster back.
We are back in the cargo bay, which is goopier than ever. Trip and Archer both state that they feel each other's minds drifting away. Rostov is completely out.
No.
As
But
Archer,
he survived past the first ad break, so I want to acknowledge that I was too cynical, or too pessimistic.
As Archer and Trip hang in there wrapped in slimy white ropes, Trip observes, when Zephram Cochrane talked about new life, new civilizations, do you think this is what he had in mind?
You don't know what Zephram was into on the weekends.
Well, he did end up with that cloud creature that was having sex with him on the rag.
What?
It's a toss episode. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. Moving on. We're moving on.
Moving on.
Hoshi has made a breakthrough. They're almost ready to start building the syntax. Phlox calls in. Crewman Kelly's vitals are dropping. They are running out of time. Malcolm is in wherever he works, setting up 2 mic stands that generate an unstable field. They're making some adjustments. It starts to hold. T'Pol calls and tells them they need to move. They need the field to protect them while they try the translation. Back in cargo bay, there's no way to make cling wrap look terrifying. Malcolm enters. Malcolm enters and sets up his emitters. As the tendrils close, the field is working. Hoshi and T'Pol enter, and Hoshi holds up her tricorder and starts yelling, "Ship!" No, not really. The way this language...
She has one move!
The way this language works is it starts emitting a tone and then they vary it. It's kind of like tinnitus mixed with Morse code as the initial version of it. There's no response at first. Phlox is monitoring the vitals of the crew members. Suddenly something happens and they hear what sounds like whale song. Eventually it works and they get coordinates. T'Pol says they already have the coordinates to the creature's homeworld, but Hoshi says these are more precise, longitude and latitude, specific area on the planet. Suddenly,
So it's
Trips...
hitchhiking.
It's my girlfriend's house.
I'm okay, but they didn't translate the sound. They presumably they translated the neuron activity.
They're just doing the thing. It's Star Trek magic. It's just they're using the tricorder, and it's like
Okay.
what's
Sure.
the Close
Sure,
Encounters of the
Hoshi.
Third Kind, where the music is supposed to be the
As though I
language,
would
and
have
that's how
seen
they're
that movie,
communicating.
Bill.
It's just it's translated somehow
Okay,
through the
okay.
magic of the computers.
But
Phlox-
without the charm of Richard Dreyfuss sculpting in mashed potatoes.
Exactly. Phlox notes that Trip's heart rate is increasing, which is good because their vitals are stabilizing. There are more goopy sounds as the crew members are released from the packing tape nightmare. T'Pol
Interesting.
orders Malcolm to release the force field, which he reluctantly does, and they pull everybody out, and the creature retracts. Archer and T'Pol wake up on the floor looking like it's pretty disgusting to imagine what they look like. They're just laying there covered in white
got
slime.
slimed?
They absolutely got slimed.
It's got a Weekend in Caligula's Rome vibe.
Yep.
What was the creature's plan initially, though? It was just going to just take over people until eventually.
We're getting there. We're going to get there.
Oh, wait, you mean we're actually going to get an
We are.
explanation for this? All right.
We're going to get a potential explanation.
All right, shut up and let Bill talk. I want to get there.
We cut to a planet where the shuttlecraft is landing. The crew steps out in envirosuits carrying a giant packing case. The whole area is surrounded by these glowing tendrils. "Look at all of them," says Hoshi. And T'Pol says, "Not them, it. This is all one organism." They open the cases that they have, and both the big small goop and the tendril crawl out and rejoin the mass. Malcolm asks why it took their crew, and Phlox says he can't say. Perhaps when it was separated, it simply looked for any other life form it could find. Then the shuttle pod flies off, and the episode ends.
End of episode.
Huh. So we have no idea how did it come from the crustacean ship?
The Cretaceans landed on this planet and found this creature, and then presumably some little bit that was looking to mix and mingle with strange new races.
Yeah, it's like,
I'd
like
on
to
their
see
planet.
what's out there.
But the Cretaceans did not, well, as far as we know, plant this.
It was not
on
an
their ship.
attack.
Yeah.
Gotcha. But why didn't it presumably it was on their ship. Why did it wait until it got onto the Enterprise
Unclear.
to actually? Okay,
Never
so we
asked,
got
never
an
answered.
That
explanation with gigantic holes in it, but fair enough. All right. Wow, that was quite a ride.
Episode thoughts. This was a decent episode. I like that it was an ensemble, and all of the main cast had something to do. I feel
Even
like
Travis.
Even
Travis,
even
yeah.
it was such a good
Travis.
episode. Even Travis had something to do. I feel like the writers still don't have a handle on who Malcolm is, because in this episode they take the tone that he's like that Worf would have taken on TNG.
Yeah.
Like any threat to the ship must be taken as a threat to their livelihood.
I feel like he's been like that before.
Yeah, that
little
does seem
bit.
kind of right, but not.
But my take on Malcolm is he comes off as a guy who's geeky about weapons and explosives rather than a guy who's bloodthirsty and like he's not like this is just he's like a gun
I guess I
nut.
don't see him as
This is his thing.
bloodthirsty, but I see him as like somebody who does not like any risk.
Mm-hmm.
And will
also is,
immediately like hit back really hard.
Yeah, and he's like very paranoid about like because it's his job to be like threats need to be dealt with. That is sort of the vibe I get from him.
The big problem is that he doesn't express that logically. He doesn't say, as head of security, it is my job to assess threats. Like he just is like, you didn't see how it attacked the captain.
I'm gonna kill
instead
that
he's
shit.
Like, I'm a Nazi doctor now. I am going to run tests on them.
Yeah. I like that Phlox stood up to him for ethics of testing on this creature, and I also like that Hoshi and T'Pol finally hashed out their conflict again.
Good.
Because we hadn't yet gotten into the 24 era where torture of a suspect was just sort of
Totally fine, yeah.
the theme of the week.
This would have been really good if this episode had been so much earlier in the episode to like sort of play out what the crew dynamics are. So, I'm gonna say the practical effects, like the CGI effects, when you see this creature as a CGI monster that's crawling through the vents, that's okay. The practical effects are kind of lame. It just looks
tape
like
and spooge.
It looks like packing tape. You cannot see them drenched in the scoop and not think porno. I'm serious. But I did like that they came
very
to.
specific
I'm
genre.
so looking forward to watching this.
Well, how do you feel about Scott Bakula? But I did like that it came to a non-violent solution, which felt very Star Trek-y.
Very nice.
And they ended the mission without starting a blood feud with another species. So
they actually helped somebody.
They get a gold star.
In fact, they ended a blood feud with a species.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they didn't. So they learned something about this.
Star
And
Trek
they made
Enterprise. This could have gone so much worse.
And they made a significant technological leap, which is, I feel like that's another Star Trek trope of, people have been working on this for years, but if we think about it really hard for a weekend, we'll figure it out.
Wait, so they did build the force field? What was the two truths and a lie?
Well, we'll get to that in a second.
Already.
I have one final thought on this, but like the thing you don't want to think too hard about is that the Cretaceans have met enough alien races that they have a universal translator, but this is the first race that eats food in public.
That's another point. Real.
Don't think about that too much. So the two truths and a lie. The lie was that with Hoshi out of action, Trip is forced into the role of translator.
Womp womp.
Yep. Porthos, good boy scale. How good a boy was Porthos on this episode? He was a very good boy. Once
Such
again,
a good boy.
once again, he barked at the antagonist, but no one listened to him.
Yeah, if Archer had only listened to him, this episode would have been over so much sooner.
Well, no one was in the room with him at the time.
Okay, I didn't realize that.
But wouldn't it have been great if, like, Porthos was like, Archer walks in and Porthos is just pointing, like...
Maybe they need to install a big red button that Porthos can press whenever he detects an alien presence.
Fucking alien!
I've seen plenty of Instagram videos of dogs that can do like 30 or 40 words. But I'm also wondering, why don't they ask the crustaceans to, like, can we borrow your universal translator work on our dog? It says something about how they think about Porthos as an entity, that his communication is not
But
worth...
the Ferengi tried. The Ferengi
Yep.
actually
It's a
tried
lower
to...
life form.
But it's a lower life form and they couldn't make it work.
Yeah.
I mean, it's bullshit because if I turned a universal translator onto Fenrir, I would hear a lot of things. Mostly a list of grievances, but
No, that just turns into the Far Side cartoon where everything the dogs are saying, hey, 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 hey. Now we turn to the saucy section. How sexy was this episode on a scale from the Medusa that drove people insane with its hideousness to Commander Jack Ransom wearing Deanna Troy's workout leotard?
I'm honestly not sure which one of those is sexy or not.
Yeah, that is the normal state we're in.
Wait until you see his butt in a mirror.
You have got to watch Lower Decks, KO. You'd love it.
Gang, this is straight up fetish material for a lot of people. They're people just covered in white goop. It's not my thing, but I'm not going to kink shame, so you do you. Your mileage may vary in terms of how sexy this episode is.
Scott Bukakula.
Yeah! That might be the episode title.
That is definitely the episode title.
Well, my work here is done. It was nice knowing you all.
Yeah, thank you, KO.
Oh, man, out of nowhere.
Oh, that's great.
Technical difficulties. The most technobabble thing from the episode. There's some classic technobabble here as they try to translate the language and invent the force field. Lots of talk about binomial algorithms and emitters being off by 2 microns, but they don't invent any new, like, fictional elements or anything like that.
Yeah.
With the Phlox, the creepiest thing Phlox did in this episode, and I'm going to say honestly, this is not his fault.
Right.
Oh, no.
But when the crew is gathered for movie night and the screen cuts just for a second to security camera footage of Phlox sitting alone in his medbay, I was worried for a second that it was going to get really fucking weird. And then it immediately cuts to another scene. So Phlox did not do anything weird, but the show made it weird. Yes, Chef. Any mentions of Chef? No mentions of Chef, but they do make a big deal out of her prime rib with horseradish.
That's another thing. That's a small quibble, but wouldn't it be much harder to get beef in space than it would be to get a plant?
They have protein.
They dealt with this.
They have protein sequencers.
Okay.
Yeah.
They have
It's not real beef.
I
They do
really
not have
wanted
cows
there
on
to
the
be.
Enterprise.
I really wanted there to be a cargo bay filled with cows, but apparently not.
They have a hydroponics bay where they grow vegetables, but they resequence the proteins.
Yeah, they don't have replicators, but they can do that.
Right.
Thing.
So I have a Yes Chef update.
Excellent.
Ooh,
Cannot wait.
excellent.
So, Bill, you told us previously about Dorothy Duder, or Chef Dorothy, who was the chef / like food stylist for Enterprise.
Mm-hmm.
And you had those blog posts from her husband that you sent us, I made one of the recipes.
Excellent.
So excited.
I made the meatloaf. So this was the meatloaf from Shuttlepod 1.
Yes.
Wow.
And it's made with turkey because I guess she wanted it to look ugly, like ugly airplane food.
Right.
So because turkey has like a lighter color, it would just look like a like miscolored meatloaf.
Yeah.
But she still wanted it to taste delicious. And I can attest that it does taste delicious. I made it. It was really good. I've never had meatloaf before, actually.
Oh, wow.
What? Wow.
Yeah, we weren't really, I don't know. My mom wasn't like the type of mom that made meatloaf.
Yeah.
So
You're not
I've never
missing
had
anything.
meatloaf.
I'm not astonished that you've never tasted meatloaf.
Well,
because
I
it's
don't
an
know,
amazing thing.
I had the turkey meatloaf. I had Chef Dorothy's turkey meatloaf, and it was absolutely delicious.
Awesome.
I also made some potatoes with it, mashed potatoes with it, of course. Although
Excellent.
there was no Chef Dorothy recipe for potatoes. I just made mashed potatoes. But
Hey, mashed potatoes aren't that hard, though. Like,
yeah, mashed potatoes are pretty simple. But it was delicious. Strongly recommend trying out some of Chef Dorothy's recipes.
Fantastic.
awesome.
When they say presentation is key, that's not usually what you think of, but
Yeah, and actually, it is very ugly.
I was going to say, I can attest
kind of
to.
gross.
I saw
Yeah,
the
I can
pictures.
attest to when you sent that picture, I was like, ooh, that doesn't look great. But you were like, this is so good. And as soon as you said it was turkey, I was like, oh, well, that makes sense because turkey doesn't look right in meatloaf, for sure.
Yeah, I posted a photo on Facebook, and when this episode comes out, if I remember, I'll try to also post one on Blue Sky.
Yeah. Cool.
All right, now we move on to Will's Holorex. We all know that William Riker is watching this entire show on the holodeck. These are suggestions of something that he could watch instead. So what have we been occupying ourselves with this time, Maria? Your suggestion.
So I was trying to think about what I should do for my recommendation, and I watched a movie last night that I think you guys would enjoy. It's called My Old Ass. It's on, I believe it's on Prime, and it's a fun little story about a teenager who gets high on mushrooms and somehow summons her older self to meet her older self. And then they have a whole conversation, and it's incredible. And her older self is Aubrey Plaza, who is fantastic. And really my recommendation then became Aubrey Plaza because I've also just finished Agatha All Along. Is that what it's called?
Yep.
And Aubrey Plaza just steals that whole show. It's so fun and so good. So yes, both Agatha All Along and My Old Ass. It's great.
Jamie, what is your recommendation for this week?
So I had planned this. I didn't realize how apropos of the episode it would be. But my recommendation is the book Heated Rivalry by Rachel Reed. It is gay hockey smut.
nice.
Horny romance.
What is water polo, but if not unfrozen hockey?
That's right. That's a good point. It's
if you forget to take your skates off, you probably drown.
Horny romance is not my usual reading genre, but some friends of mine that are really into romance had recommended it to me, and I was hooked from the first page. It's actually the second book in the Game Changers series, but you do not have to read the first book. You can just go straight to the second. That's what I did. So I originally read this book about 10 months ago, but the reason I'm recommending it now is because they were just re-released. The entire series was just re-released with new cover art. And I need you to understand that the original cover art for Heated Rivalry is so horny. It's just like two basically like male or masculine torsos with like like with the heads cut off because the heads are like above the fold or whatever, and with like the pants kind of undone. And it's the type of book that, like, when I was reading it, I was like, I can't take this anywhere. I can't read this book on the train. I can't, like, even put it in my bag to take to work because it would be so embarrassing if it fell
yourself
out.
a brown paper bag and cut it out.
Yeah, I mean, it truly is that kind of cover.
That book.
It was the kind of book that, like, when I have like our house cleaners club, I'm like, I gotta like put this in a drawer, like I can't have this sitting out.
Amazing.
But the new covers are like, the new cover for this book is an illustrated depiction of two hockey players like facing each other on the court or rink or whatever it's called. So
it's a more socially acceptable cover.
There's surprisingly little hockey for this hockey book. It's not really about the hockey. But yeah, this is a book that you can read on the train without everyone around you realizing that you are reading smut with the new covers. So the series is called Game Changers. I'm recommending the second book in this series called Heated Rivalry. Also, if you like it, the sequel to it is the sixth book in the series, which is the sequel to like that same couple. And you can just read book 2 and 6 if you want. I hear the rest of the series is good. Rachel Reed.
Cool.
I've heard that the rest of the series is good, just not like those two are the best ones. They're the only ones that I've read. But now that they have new covers, I might read all of them.
Sure.
KO, what is your recommendation?
So, as we touched on very briefly at the beginning of the episode, we are coming to you live from the Twilight of Civilization. So I've been thinking hard about what I should recommend, and I have two very dissimilar. One that is escapist and one that is sort of helping you prepare, hopefully, for the world to come. So my escapism is a podcast called Worlds Beyond Number. It is a D&D / role-playing podcast that's Brennan Lee Mulligan from Dimension 20, Brennan Lee Mulligan and Lou Wilson from Dimension 20, Abria Iyengar and Erika Ishii. They are doing, it's a completely audience-funded thing where they're basically just doing actual play podcasts, and they're really leaning into like sound design and storytelling and giving themselves the space. It is, in my opinion, the apex of the genre to this point, and it's really just deep storytelling and really emotionally resonant and hilarious. And if you like actual play, I think it is, like I said, the prime example of the genre. My other recommendation is a book called The Originalism Trap by Madiba K. Denny. It is about the right-wing takeover of the courts from a legal analysis perspective. Their whole jam is that they're supposedly interpreting the law as it was intended to be interpreted by the founders. Yeah, supposedly. And basically just talks about why that's complete bullshit, even if they were doing it accurately, and then proposes what she calls living constitutionalism as a judicial philosophy that takes the founders' intent seriously, but then allows it to be useful in a modern context. And so it's not necessarily a roadmap for like how to push back, but it is more about if you are someone who's interested in the law and the courts, or you want your congressional representatives to be interested in the law and the courts, it gives you a grounding to say, here's what we want, here's how we want the courts to be operating. And it just is also kind of an interesting history lesson too. So The Originalism Trap by Madiba K. Denny, who also writes for a blog called Balls and Strikes, and is very sharp and smart on the federal judiciary specifically.
Cool. Awesome.
My recommendation this week is for an anime and manga series that Maria and I have both enjoyed, called The Ascendance of a Bookworm.
So good! It's so fun!
It is a Japanese series about a woman from our world she is 20 years old. She is absolutely obsessed with books, and in the middle of an earthquake, she is crushed in an earthquake by books where she works. And
it's not fair.
And is reborn in a fantasy kingdom as a frail 4-year-old child, and she attempts to create books in a world where books and education and all these things do not exist. And it's just an amazing series. How would you describe this series, Maria?
Well, it's incredible. The thing that is sort of like, think about going into a world where books are almost don't exist. They kind of exist, but they really don't. And figuring out how to make a book, like how to make a physical book with the knowledge that we have today, right? And it's super fun.
The
As
amazing
a kid,
thing,
by the way.
The amazing thing about this series is the world building, because she moves through the status. She is born into, she's not completely poor. She has a family. She has a place to live. But then she starts to move. She becomes acquainted with a businessman because she creates all of these ideas that exist in our world, like shampoo and perfume and all these other things, because she was also a crafter in our world. And then she moves into the religious sect, and then she moves into the nobility. So the world building of this series is absolutely amazing, but it's a very fun series. And also, it I never realized how much I enjoyed an adult yelling at a child who is also an adult so much.
So fun.
It amazes me so much. So The Ascendance of a Bookworm, it is a light novel series. It is also an anime series and a manga series, and I highly recommend that you watch it. This is the end of our episode. Thank you for listening. Next episode, Jamie will be leading us through Fallen Hero. KO, where can people find you online?
Well, you can hear me mentioned at the end of Enterprise Explaining episodes.
In about 30 seconds.
Primarily, you can find me on my website, particulatemedia.com. I'm a freelance podcast producer, editor, and help people launch podcasts. Come to me with an idea, and I will help you turn it into a show. Social media-wise, I am most active on Blue Sky and as Gen Vexed. I do technically have an Instagram account with the same handle, but I don't remember the last time I updated it. Thanks.
Cool.
And thank you for having me.
Excellent.
Thank you for coming on, KO.
Thank
Absolutely.
you for making our podcast a reality, because I don't think it would exist without you.
Jamie, don't insult the man that he brought this into the world.
If you want to blame someone, blame KO.
Special thanks to KO Myers
You're welcome.
at Particulate Media for sound assistance. Special thanks to our friend David for our beautiful cover art, and John Stephen King for being the voice of our computer. If you like the show, please rate, review, and subscribe on your podcast app, and tell your friends about it. This is the most important way that you can spread the word about this ridiculous show that we do, is telling someone else about it. You can follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Enterprise Splaining, and on Blue Sky at Enterprise Splain. You can also email us any comments, questions, such as where can I find high-res photos of Scott Bakula covered in white goop, to enterprisesplaining@gmail.com. Make sure you
And I'm pretty
CC
sure
Maria.
I'll have that answer. I'll have that answer in the next 30 minutes, so just email us. I'll figure it out.
If you're Googling, don't trust the AI results.
We'd
Whatever
love to hear
pops
from you.
Oh, God.
And if you want to support this podcast financially, you can find us on Buy Me a Coffee as Enterprise Splaining. We will see you in 2 weeks.
Bye.
Bye.
So long.
Computer and program.
This has been a broadcast of the ESO Network. Be part of the crew and help support our shows by donating to our ESO Patreon or by shopping at the TeePublic store, which can all be found at www.esonetwork.com. The ESO Network, your station for all things geek.